one of the key things, and also about gender mainstreaming. Have you heard the term gender mainstreaming? Yes, okay. So that, a lot of gender mainstreaming literature is about the idea that many policies target women, and that gender is not just about women, right? So, for example, maternity leave. Do you have in Indonesia or Pakistan, do you have maternity leave?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have paternity leave?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's great.
In Pakistan, it started 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
I'm doing it.
Now, how is it? Because here in Japan, there's a lot of harassment against men taking paternity leave. They're harassed by their co-workers or boss or whatever.
Socially,
Sorry?
in social way, not in a direct way, or is it in a direct way?
Oh, well, I guess
The
if you're
harassment.
being kind of, what we say, bullied at work, harassed at work, yeah, it's pretty direct.
Ah.
Yeah. So legally now they have the right to take paternity leave, but socially it's very difficult to do. So there's a lot of kind of debate and discussion in the news and you know how that is. So in Europe they actually, you know, the northern countries, they created, for example, paternity leave. They've had it for quite a while, but they found that men weren't using it almost for the same reasons, right? But also just being away from work, they tended to get behind in the work. So therefore they felt like they were being, you know, they weren't being as competitive. So they didn't want to take it. So the government actually said, you know, because at that point they could switch it over to their wife to have more maternity leave. So that's what they were doing. They were just like, so in order to stop that, they said, okay, either use it or lose it. Men either use it or lose it. And that pushed up the utility rate a little bit, right? But it's still an issue. You know, we see policy and law changes and society sometimes is ahead, but sometimes is behind, right, these changes. And race, of course, same. Gender is not about women. Race is not just about people of color. And of course, we in theoretical, scholarly writing and theory, we don't use the idea of race anymore, right? That's kind of passé, but it's still used a lot. And it's based in critical feminism, critical race theory, this idea of intersectionality. So it's the acknowledgement that within groups of people there's a common identity, but then there are other intergroup differences, right? So we just went over that. And yeah, so these different overlapping oppressions happen in different ways at different times. So when you guys, especially when you're in your home country, you're kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to put it out there. Do you have any issues with racism? Do you, yeah, right? Gender issues. You feel discriminated because of your gender. Do you feel discriminated because of your age? Like those things. Here, how about language? At home, do you have any issues around language? Maybe dialect if you're from
Maybe
certain,
dialect,
yeah, if you're from certain areas of that. So my point is that here, suddenly you're out of that kind of those dynamics of being maybe in the norm or in the dominant group, right? When you're in those dominant areas, those areas of dominant, you don't notice some things, right? Because they are just normal. That's the norm. And so creating policy, it's very hard when you're in the dominant group. You're in the privileged group, whatever that is at the time. So that's why I like living in other countries, because it really challenges me all the time to think, you know, what's normal, what is my position in the world, and why, and those kinds of things. So generalization, which is kind of looking at neutrality of how we design policies, right? So these kind of sweeping generalizations are no longer, they become much more complex and they will no longer have the same utility that they used to, especially when dealing with marginalization and challenges. So, for example, so anti-global warming policies, right? So, you know, often they're kind of these kind of big sweeping policies that governments now, especially austerity, anti-austerity or austerity policies, whatever they're implementing. And they're kind of implementing them across the board, right? In the name of anti-global warming, for example. So, for example, in France, this first one, subsidies, not that one, the raising of gasoline taxes. That's happening in many places. But anyway, in France, the yellow jackets, you know, that whole movement came out because they raised taxes on gasoline to try to deter people from using gasoline and also to raise revenue so that they could do some other ecological policies and that. But what ended up happening and where that movement came from was a rural area. Because once the government raised taxes on gasoline just a little bit, people in the rural areas were completely disadvantaged. Some of them completely shut down. Because why?
Transportation.
Yeah, there's no public transportation, or really very little, right? But I mean, they never thought of that. How could they not think of that? How could they not, policymakers, how could they not? Because that, very recently you think, well, yeah, 50 years ago or 60 years, but that's happening now, still. And that's just based on the geographic reason, right?